Hello, welcome to this panel. My name is Detlef Houdeau. I would moderate this. I'm the co-leader of the Platform Learning System subgroup for IT, security, and privacy. Today with me, we have 4 panelists, Professor Björn Eskofier. He's also a member of the Platform Learning System working group healthcare. He is also the chair of the Machine Learning and Data Analytics at the Friedrich Alexander University in Erlangen-Nuremberg. We have Marian Gläser, member of the Platform Learning System sub-working group, IT security and privacy. He is the co-founder and CEO of Brighter AI. Welcome. We have Professor Ahmad-Reza Sadeghi, member of the Platform Learning System, IT Security and Privacy. He is also System Security Lab member at the University in Darmstadt. And last but not least, we have Professor Michael Huth, also member of the Platform Learning System and co-founder of company KI2022. I hope I speak this right. This is not easy to take this. So the view is on this topic here is to have a view regarding privacy aspects and data use aspects of AI in 2 different main domains where we see big potential. One is the domain of healthcare and health services. And the other is the topic of mobility, because both are very important for the German citizen and society. We have in both domains experts now in this panel. And I would like to start first with the view on the healthcare part. I would ask Björn, maybe you can give a short introduction or a short statement regarding AI in the context of privacy and security in context of the healthcare sector, please.
Yes, absolutely. So especially in healthcare, we have a situation that is different from many other application domains. So in other application domains, we can train AI systems with sufficient data. Like, for example, in the automotive section, we can have self-driving cars or cars that are driven by humans driving around and establishing data about road conditions. Or in the area of internet recommendations, there's plenty of data about recommendations in the internet in the various platforms available. So these data can be used to train well-working automatic AI systems, because as many or most of us know, the AI can only be as good as the data that is used for its training. In healthcare, we have a different situation. So many of the data are in silos, and the silos are called university hospitals, the treating physicians, the patients themselves, because some of us are carrying around these, you can't see it really well, wearables that are collecting data about our sleep behavior, about our activity profiles, and so on. And all these data could be super interesting for training AI systems that are, for example, tracking the progress of Parkinson's disease, or activity differences in cardiovascular diseases like heart problems, heart conditions. So if we want to train AI systems in the healthcare domain with sufficient data, we need to tackle the privacy and data protection concerns that many of the citizens rightly have. And there are solutions out there. So many of you might have heard about the European Health Data Space regulation that's coming up. So this is a regulation for every European citizen to have a personal health data space, which is protected in a way that the data are, all the data about one individual are compiled in this personal health data space, but it also has interfaces for researchers like me and others here in the panel and out there, or researching companies like pharma companies that want to develop a vaccine against a pandemic virus faster than possible without the data. So I think this already paints a picture of where we have to go. I'm happy to give more details about some of the things that I've touched on. Just one important sentence at the end. Other world regions, like especially the US and especially Asia, China, are heavily investing in these kind of shared data for the healthcare sector. And Europe and Germany in particular should be well versed against these international streams.
Many thanks, Björn. This was an excellent introduction into the framework of this vertical and the health. Maybe I would ask Ahmed Sadeghi if you have some additional points to raise. You are muted, I think. Sorry.
Okay, the usual problem. What I can say, I'm not a physician or medical experts. Data is data for me. As a computer scientist, I don't mind. There are, of course, different environmental aspects. Like, for example, I mentioned in my talk before, I am involved in a big project that Intel is doing with a number of hospitals in US together with University of Pennsylvania, and they do it for tumor segmentation, and the project seems to be very interesting because they have some interesting results.
Yeah.
And certainly applying federated learning there has helped a lot. But on the other hand, privacy is a problem there, but they were more interested in manipulating the data by the clients. So that, because that was a big topic in the US, as they were, some hospitals just manipulated the data, or not hospitals, but the doctors that were responsible for it, because you can sue people for their, for failing to, so to say, to identify the tumor in the right way, in the right time. And that is what they were, so to have a kind of authenticity of the data and integrity of the data. This guarantee, it was important for them. Yeah.
Yep. Third point, I would go to Michael Huth. Maybe you can give, as a kind of startup company founder, your view on this topic, please.
Yeah, thanks. Just wanted to follow up on the point just made. So, I mean, the federated learning, I think there's a lot of good work one can do to adopt AI in this space, because the hospitals and insurers, this is sort of low scale systems, maybe dozens of servers interacting, and differential privacy and other techniques can kind of, de-anonymize at the source. But I think it's also important, and I think Ahmad has sort of hinted at that too. These things have to be embedded in actual workflows, in this case, clinical workflows. And there can be political and other side effects, like with the fear of being sued and so on. So I think there's a holistic perspective one has to have, and the regulatory complexity is not going to decrease. For example, in the US, medical data is governed by HIPAA, and so all the Californian wonderful legislation for data privacy is actually not in scope. It's very explicit on that. So, navigating and understanding that landscape is very important for not just startups, but also for big players like Intel.
Yeah, I would come back to this topic regarding startup company or scale-up company in the health domain. If you have a brilliant idea regarding a new medical device for implementing in the body of a person, we call it then a medical edge system. You can create such kind of new devices with a very small team. You have a brilliant business model, and you would like to have some intelligence in such medical device, and you think about AI as personalized information system on the system. For example, a pacemaker, a new generation of pacemaker. If you start with a startup company, you can develop the hardware, you can develop the software, you can buy, for example, the AI software, how you get data for training such kind of pacemaker, for example, to get real data, maybe from a hospital or from a clinic, and to verify this is the quality of this data is enough, the usage for my device is very good fitting. How you work with such kind of, let me say, topic, if you start with a new company, with new people, with a new business, you're looking for a new device, and AI, it's one of the important topic in my medical next generation product, but you are kind of starter company. How you work, because you need not only the AI algorithm, you need also the training data in a very let me say high level profile, high level quality. How you deal with this, Michael? Can you give us some insights?
Yeah, I mean, it's not my domain, but with my academic hat, I can comment on this too. So in the UK in particular, I mean, there's NHS Digital, which is a very rich ecosystem for sharing medical data within a regulatory regime. And so under COVID, for example, there was a burst of AI usage in the NHS because also the regulators kind of, said, okay, we have a bit of pressure here. Maybe we should be a bit more liberal in this. Yep. And for example, triaging is not regulated, but any kind of patient intervention, like the medical devices you mentioned, is. So, in terms of doing AI for triaging to optimize workflows is actually a low entry barrier. But any kind of device thing, that's a much more complicated thing when it comes to production and actually putting it into patients. But data, we have a lot in the UK, and so, I mean, that's of course also safeguarded, but it's very standard that academic centers of excellence interact with hospitals like Imperial, where I am, with various NHS trusts. And so the people who work in medical imaging or bioengineering, that most of their collaborations are actually in this kind of medical ecosystem.
Okay. Yeah, I would jump to Björn. We have in the medical domain, I would say, two extreme positions. We have on one hand side, so-called the decentralized data handling, for example, in a medical edge device, which is one piece in one body, analyzing one person, and use some AI software for kind of personalization of monitoring the person. This is one, let me say, corner. The other is you have a kind of cloud system where you have thousands of patient data, medical records data, for example, special health information system data, and you have a lot of user like hospitals, like family doctors, like clinics, and so on. In which domain, Björn, you would see this topic regarding privacy and security is more of interest? Is this more this small device, a small medical edge used by one person in, let me say, in one home area? Or is this more this big system which a huge number of users with big numbers of data, of different training data from different patients? Which topic would be more of interest regarding the topic of security and privacy? What is your feeling today, and what is your outlook for the next 3, 4, 5 years? Because we have more and more AI in the healthcare domain in different areas, like computer tomograph system, like special healthcare blood pressure system, and so on. You have so many domains to use AI in healthcare that we expect more and more such kind of centralized, decentralized data management system will come down the street.
Yeah, thank you for the question. First of all, I think that all areas in which personal data, first of all, and especially personal healthcare data are stored, need the correct data privacy and security mechanisms in place. So it doesn't matter whether you have a data lake or a cloud system or an individualized personal health data space solution that's carrying individualized or individual's data. I think it's important in all domains, but they of course have different levels of usability. For example, in the large cloud system that you made an example of, I have maybe a few administrators that are IT affine and know exactly how the system works and can also give researchers access to certain parts of the data lake or certain information quite easily. And so to say, the usability of the data for research, for information visualization, for whatever is ensured by some knowledgeable people that can actually handle the system.
Yep.
In the case of these individualized personal health data spaces, so us individuals carrying around, for example, variables that store data about ourselves, the situation is different because here the data privacy and security usability. So how is the system set? What data do I actually share with whom? Who has currently access to what? And is there a data breach currently happening? This is something that the end user doesn't want to think about or doesn't want to think about a lot. So I always take the example of my mother, who's quite digital affine for her age, but nevertheless, she doesn't want to take care like I would about data protection or how do I use even a password protected system. This is already, as you probably know, a quite high burden for individuals of a, let's say, non-digital age.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, I think that in addition to the usual data protection, data privacy, data security aspects that we should design into all systems, for these individualized systems, for the personal health data spaces of the future, I think that data privacy, security, handling issues, so the user interfaces and the usability of those systems, that's key. So the young generation out there, if you listen to us, maybe take a few more lectures into that domain.
Yep. Let us look to the AI technology point of view. Ahmed, Sadeghi, we have seen different AI algorithms, different technologies are running in the health domain. Furthered learning is one key buzzword today in the market. Machine learning as a general is also. Did you see some trends regarding the technology, AI technology topic in the health domain, or did you say we have so many different use cases like data filtering, like learning of data analytics and so on, that we have not one mainstream technology in health? What is your feeling regarding technology development today and also in the next near future?
So this is, it all depends.
Yeah.
When we talk about technology, application of a technology, the question is here in health area specifically, because as was mentioned at the beginning, I think Björn was mentioning that health area is a specific area for itself. And I indeed believe in that, because if you look at the landscape of hospitals, not only in Germany, but also all over the world, in, so to say, more advanced, technologically advanced countries, you will see that they are still, even when I have very good contacts to San Diego, they have top researchers there. But if it comes to hospitals and different hospitals sharing their data, analyzing on the same problem, it becomes extremely difficult in practice. Now, what do is they go and take the technology owner. Who is the technology owner? Microsoft, Google, and they ask them, oh, what about putting our data on your server? And what about privacy and security? And they say, we handle it. So the question is, there are a lot of applications in them, from edge devices, as pacemaker that you mentioned, up to all kind of analysis, the input data. Even if you have to clean the data, you use the data for different aspects. We have seen it in this project with in Pennsylvania that there are lots of hospitals, and even providing the right data is difficult for them because they don't have the knowledge. Each of them must have the So they do not understand the application when they do not have the knowledge. So you cannot expect from each hospital to have an AI expert who has a PhD in machine learning or whatever, and to understand the whole thing and say, okay, we are going to apply it. Even IT is a big problem. So there are two aspects here, just to make it short. One is, who is the technology owner? The hospitals have currently problems, although there are a lot of applications from so to say, cancer analytics to developing the next vaccine. And we know that in general, AI, machine learning can help a lot here, but expertise are missing, and the reliance on big tech companies is getting bigger. Even governments ask them to provide them server. And I think this is the critical point, that nobody somehow have access to a real know-how one day if it goes like this, if the reliance on big technology companies is getting higher. So they will dominate and they will dictate the applications one day, because they say, we do that, you give us so much money, we provide our server and our beautiful algorithms for you. So it is outside what you asked, but I think this is, I see a lot of applications, but it is sometimes out of our hands, because research can do to a certain degree. After that, there are political discussions, and is this meaningful? This application of AI for this specific. So such an analysis I have not seen. We have this discussion also in Lernende Systeme, that do we have a way of evaluating what is reasonable, what is meaningful for health area when we talk about application of AI. Sorry for the long answer.
So this brings me to another point, Michael. I would like to touch this with you regarding the different stakeholder in the health domain. We have insurance organization, we have healthcare, hospital service organization, we have pharmacists. Did you see some difference? And you have the producer of medical products, for example, the development. Did you see also some difference agenda, let me say, of the stakeholder regarding what is needed in AI, what is needed in privacy, and what is needed in security? What is your feeling on this, let me say, stakeholder landscape, what we have in each country? In some countries, we have also some competition between insurance organizations, we have competition between hospitals, you know this all. What is your feeling regarding the priority on security and privacy in the health domain regarding these different stakeholders?
Yeah, thanks. That's an excellent question. Maybe I'll just take a bit of a step back. I mean, I think it comes back a bit to my opening statement as well around governance. Yeah, I think a lot of the adoption hurdles we see around data protection are really just informed by cultural issues. And I think in Germany in particular, I find that, there's a risk avoidance culture, so at the governance level. And if you pair this up with informational self-determination as a kind of a mantra, it basically impedes any kind of digitization efforts. And so if you don't even have the digitization infrastructure, it's very hard to try and do the sort of projects that Ahmed has described, because they might not even have the IT abilities to plug things together. But in a way, I mean, privacy to me, even in the health domain, is mostly a compliance issue. Yes, so they all want to be compliant, and then the big companies want to make money. I mean, hospitals don't really make money; they wonder about balancing their books. So if you have like DeepMind and other sort of big companies now moving into the medical domain, that makes me worry a little bit, because the existing playing field is not going to be like that anymore when these sorts of companies move in. I mean, Google and Facebook and so on have given us a taste of this in other domains. So I think there's a really big question here to be asked, when we regulate. I mean, are we going to regulate in a way that will create a more level playing field in the digital and medical health sector of the future? And I think the EU efforts that were described by Björn are probably a good way to try and do that. But I think we're talking about sort of antitrust and all sorts of other things to really level that playing field at the end.
Yeah. This topic of regulation brings me to another question, Björn, I would like to raise. You as a university stakeholder, we see in the European economic area many regulation. The AI Act comes down the street. The data protection regulation is there. We have the medical device regulation 2.0 in place. The data governance act comes down the street. Did you see too much regulation today in this context of AI and healthcare, or did you say something is missing? Regarding certification, for example, regarding quality of AI, regarding conformity tests, and so on. What is your feeling? Did we have enough regulation, or did we have too much regulation? Or what is your view?
I think that the European Union has covered quite well the important fields. I have to say that because I'm also one of the experts that the EU consulted with in, for example, the creation of the European Health Data Space regulations. And of course, data privacy security issues were also discussed in those expert panels. Yeah. So just to give you one example, I think many people out there are experiencing GDPR and its German variant, the DSGVO, as something burdensome. Yeah, because now, since it's implemented fully, we have to, when we open a web browser on our mobile phones and open a new web page, we always have to click through all these cookie messages. And that's just annoying. Yeah, for the knowledgeable people, we understand what's happening, but for most people out there, it's just annoying because they don't understand why they always have to click that. And to make matters worse, yeah, the preferred button is always the one that is not the best for our data privacy settings. But that's a different thing. What I want to point out is that GDPR in its very idea and its very core is a good thing because the regulation defines who data belongs to. It belongs to the individual that creates it, that is the center of the data creation. And that was actually something that US colleagues were looking at with quite some interest because they said, wow, this is great because now since the ownership of the data is completely also on a legal basis defined, there can be all kinds of business cases, all kinds of new research paradigms, all kinds of novel directions being set up on the GDPR. I think that the thing is not that we don't have enough legislation and enough rulings, but sometimes or really often the rulings are interpreted in the wrong way. So in a way that is too protective and is not towards the original cause of the legislation, that's not protecting the data. That's what data protection says, right? It's protecting the individual's rights. We don't want to protect data. We want to protect that an individual cannot be harmed by using the data in a malicious way. And that's the way I think many of the regulations need to be framed in order to be really working well. I want to just give you one example of something I think we need to create well in order to make systems work. So in this distributed space of potential future personal health data spaces where we can use, for example, federated learning, swarm learning to distribute algorithms to the individual data sets and then get back a joint answer, a joint algorithm. There, I think, needs to be some kind of a data fiduciary or a data TÜV. So the Germans know what I'm speaking about. So an institution that makes sure that the algorithms that are being sent out to the data are not malicious in some way and harmful. And I think that to implement that is art. And I'm hopefully I'm hopeful that we Germans, we Europeans create that in the right way that's also usable.
Yeah. this brings me to another point, Ahmed. I would like to ask you, we have normally the traditional view, the patient is in the hospital makes some analytics and some medical treatment. This is, let me say, the old school view. People are older and stay longer at home. They are not ill, but some health information, body information must be transmitted to my family doctor, must be transmitted to my hospital. But the user is, let me say, the user's view is one of the stakeholder game, which have health medical devices at home and communicate from home to hospitals. Did you see also a weak point regarding the user knowledge? Because in home you have not the infrastructure like in hospital. We are talking, for example, in Germany, 3.7 million people are staying at home, but they are not ill, but they must be controlled by some bodies. In Europe, we talk on 17 million people. Yeah, and this number increased because you see the age pyramid. We are older and older, and with this, the lifespan at home in this area is increasing, and with this, the numbers of users is increasing. Did you see also a kind of how we can train, how we can explain the consumer at the end in Europe, in 26 member states, how to handle topics with healthcare AI system in different devices using, for example, at smart home, smart building? Did they need some training? Did they need some guidance?
Oh, yes. I mean, it's not only the fact that we have an aging society.
Yeah.
There is also the fact that we could observe during the pandemic time that many people
home office, yeah,
did home office, and many were not used to do that. And they had, even those people who they have some kind of technological affinity, they were not able to use all these services at the same time because they just use one or two services during their life, and it's changed. Now for the elderly people with medical conditions and the need and the urge to be monitored, certainly there are people who are doing that, and they get the data from these people to the hospitals, but it is a very in a very non-scalable way. So there are several things that at least in US, interestingly, in the Trump era, FDA was looking into all these devices that are monitoring at home. They should be under certain regulations regarding their privacy and security aspects.
Okay.
Which is very difficult because there is no single standard that rules over all these devices. There are so many devices, so many standards, and having experts to look into these things, this is a non-trivial task, I think. The only way to do that is to have a so to say strict strategic plan from, I would not say always from government, but at least from experts who advise government to do this. But we saw in the pandemic case that it never worked out. There were simulations, there were training, there were all these things, and every country had a panic how to deal with pandemic. And although in many countries, we have lots of research in this simulation of crisis situation. So even the next crisis will come, the older the people get, the more maybe care they need at home. And this is a serious problem that I'm sure politicians talk about it, but never do anything. So there must be a way to have some regulations for these things. Regulations not always like privacy regulation that was mentioned, that is more becoming a GD, I mean, as we see it with every web page that you access, it's more annoying rather than solving a problem. But it should be a kind of really pre-work, a kind of preparation for how to deal with this society. I don't know of any solution currently in the practical sense. That theoretical on paper, I may be able to say something about security and the privacy of these devices, how you should control them, how you should think about them, but putting in practice with the knowledge that people have about technology, especially elderly people. But don't forget that elderly people of tomorrow, they will have some contact to technology because they are from our generation, for example. If you and I get very old and need medical, I hope that don't hope, but if we do that.
Okay, last question, because then we would like to move to mobility. Michael, we have touched in the previous question the topic of we have many small, medium enterprise companies, sometimes startups, sometimes scale-ups. Give you one figure, in Germany we count around about 1,000 companies with less than 50 employees. So it's very small companies, you can say, yeah. So most of them are very knowledge in health, in healthcare treatment, healthcare analytics, and they must develop products, systems, services in the health domain. And AI is not, let me say, the main knowledge coming from the university. They have no lecture on this. They have no listen to IT security topics and AI security and so on. How do you see this as a weak point in the stakeholder game? These kind of small, medium enterprise companies who have a clever idea, who would like to bring new business, new services, new technology, new innovation into the markets in Europe, but they have not the knowledge on IT security. They know what something about privacy, but first we have many European regulations. Second, we have many standards on IT security. Third, we have many different suppliers on AI software. How you see this as a kind of problem regarding the topic security and privacy in Europe from your point? Can you give us a deep view maybe?
Yeah, thanks, Detlef. I mean, if it's about SMEs, mostly in digital health, I presume, right? Not sort of wet lab things. Yeah. I mean, if it's a startup, I would say then the privacy and other sort of issues are maybe not too critical, especially if it's like venture capital funded, because they don't have any immediate pressure to have a product and sell it well. But then again, I mean, these issues will come up, as the product matures and the company grows. But then also these companies often have the option of entering partnerships, strategic ones, be that with certain medical device companies or healthcare providers and so on. I mean, this is the usual sort of dynamics, I guess, of startups, not just in the health domain. When it comes to AI, I mean, I think it's like what most other speakers also said, it very much depends. Yeah, I mean, is what you're trying to do here as service or product, can AI here really help? And if it can, it's often actually not the deep learning initially, it's maybe more classical sort of data science, where you have sort of low-hanging fruit that might help to enhance your products. So I think it kind of depends. I mean, we have maybe an example. Cogitat is a spin out of my department, where they basically take off-the-shelf EEG equipment from gaming to actually read brainwaves and get personalized models with very sophisticated signal processing types, machine learning models. And so they can actually learn quite quickly when people have intent to do certain movements with their body and so on. Mm-hmm. And then they can actually replicate that in a gaming context just by thinking what they want to do, stuff like that. So this is obviously sort of at the other end of the spectrum, where you have people that comes out of research and it's very, very sophisticated, not just, run-the-mill deep learning, but really very, very deep insights in sort of EEE type signal processing, machine learning, and how to, go into different sort of domains of signals to get these kinds of compressions that actually run on commercial off-the-shelf products. Yeah, so I think, I mean, it comes back to the adoption hurdle, so, I mean, I would think that in a health domain where AI is going to be a vital piece, you will probably look at 20-30% of the employees having a PhD. maybe in that kind of area, yeah, because otherwise it's very difficult to do that. But then again, I mean, I think it comes back to how do you scale these things up, and I think you probably will have to enter partnerships with the existing players in those domains. There's just no way around it, I guess.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay, with this, I would like to make a sharp cut now from the view of healthcare and move now to the mobility. We have also in this domain one expert, Marian Gläser. Maybe you can give a short introduction, a short statement, how you see AI security topics and privacy topics, IT security topics in the mobility domain. Maybe you can give a short statement, please.
Sure. So in mobility, I think starting off with some interesting numbers, in Europe, 7% of the GDP is actually from the automotive industry, and that doesn't account for cities that have basically public transport in the mobility space. That is a whole basically other vertical, and so an enormous part of Europe is actually automotive mobility that drives the economy. At the other hand, with new autonomous vehicles, for example, and currently data collection, you have studies from, for example, Continental Electrobit that mapping vehicle collects about 10 petabyte of data per day. This is an enormous amount of data, and if you then connect the three dots of lots of data being collected, GDPR that since 25th of May 2018 is in place, and the high economic value of the mobility space, that creates some tension and some new solutions that are needed. And this is actually maybe saying one or two words. There was already a brief connection to startups, smaller companies, scale-ups. We are one of these, and actually are in this field of privacy and innovation when it comes to camera data being used in public, and how to get this basically GDPR compliant, how to anonymize it. It's a fascinating growing space for us as a company, but it's also from a society standpoint, remembering basically from, I think, the beginning of the 2000s, discussions in London about cameras and how basically mass cameras in public, what this means for society. Now you have a Tesla that runs around the city with 8 cameras, and you don't only have one, but you have soon, let's see, with the Gigafactory in Berlin, even more on the road. And what does this mean for privacy?
Yeah, I would like to ask also Ahmad-Reza on this topic regarding the interest of two stakeholders. We have mobility, the private domain, automotive. We mentioned this before, but we have also public domain, for example, public transport. We have airports. We need video surveillance in public places. How do you see this two market stakeholder places regarding the discussion on AI in terms of security and privacy? Is this more in the public domain, or is this more related to the private industry domain?
Oh, well, so I think I am more a conspirator there because I believe that the most threatening problem for the whole society, at least free society as we call it, or democratic society, is when those two work together. The public spaces are usually under control of the government or certain companies, like, for example, Deutsche Bahn, which is still like a governmental organization and has a very good bound to the politics and politicians. And there is this, as Marian was correctly mentioning, that if you have Tesla and they are running with these cameras everywhere, of course, it is one of the individual cars, but they will be one day. For example, they are using also federated learning. It's not very, so to say, odd to think about that. and they collect this data. So what happens when they connect these data together? And that is a threat for the society. But in general, I would say cameras indeed was one of my biggest problems when people talked about privacy, specifically in England, which is which goes towards a joke. When in England people talk about privacy, and in London they have the highest density of CCTV cameras that you can even see if you are picking in your nose. So you have to be, and you're sitting in a bus. So how can you talk about privacy when you're already controlling people with these cameras? Because there are some of them, they have even speakers. So the same thing was coming in Germany. So how do you really deal with that when you're talking about some privacy? Because I said my gender or whatever, but you have so many cameras. And and we have seen that before. We have seen data analysts in London who were supporting Trump campaign in US, exactly with collecting the data, having business with Facebook, having business with government people. And this is what I am really, really afraid of. And not the fact that, Deutsche Bahn is using, indeed, in mobility, you need these things for certain aspects. But the misuse of it is much more tempting than using it for real world people.
Thank you. Michael, the mobility, we mentioned CCTV, we mentioned video surveillance, public places. I think this is a business since more than 10 years. We have seen after some attacks in Madrid, after some attacks in London, that police need such kind of surveillance systems. And we know that behind these thousands of cameras, we have not thousands of police who are monitoring TVs. We have AI algorithm for analytics. So we are, let me say, we have a lot of history in this domain, but this is more for law enforcement point of views. Did you see that this knowledge, what is created in this public area, together with some public authorities, that this can be also used more and more in the private domain to analyze this, for example, in factories, in industry 4.0 areas, where you have this more in the private domain, but you would like also to analyze what's going on in the factory, what's going on in some buildings, what's going on in some private area. Did you see this kind of joint working in the future, that learning in the public domain moves now step by step in the private? In the public, we have legal frameworks, we have law enforcement people who have a clear agenda, and the private, this could be a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bit of a difficult question. I mean, let me maybe again sort of draw a slightly wider circle here.
Yep.
I mean, also reacting to some of the things that Björn and Ahmed have said.
Please.
I mean, maybe I should also say some controversial things, because I guess that was part of the brief, so
yes.
I mean, I think this sort of informational self-determination and the kind of, constitutional rights that in the German constitutions are kind of, enshrined around this are very, very important. But I really have my doubts that, our approaches to trying to do this very diligently in certain sectors will really protect our democratic institutions and values if we're seeing how the global market and the forces are really taking on. Let me just take metaverses, as an example. I mean, this is where lots of companies now hugely invest, not just because it's exciting and it's modern technology and so on, but because those are going to be spaces in which the companies have complete control over how the individuals within them interact and on what sort of rules of engagement. You can no longer block ads and things like that on there. Companies will have access for your brainwaves and stuff like that. So, I mean, I think this will really be an increasing divergence, I would say, of what these platforms are capable of and how many people might flock to them and sign terms and conditions happily, and sort of a more historically rooted rights-based approach on things like privacy and self-determination. And I think that tension is going to grow. in years to come and will actually threaten political institutions and our understanding of social contracts. And maybe that's not a controversial statement, but I just wanted to get that out. And sort of connecting this up to the London spaces. I mean, I walk through London every day, you know, take the tube and so on. I don't feel particularly threatened by these cameras, mostly because most of them are privately owned and disjointed, you know, so it's actually very difficult to get a continuous feed of someone walking through there. And the irony is actually that, you know, our smartphones are much more reliable in tracking where we are at which time and get a continuous impression of who we are, coming back to my point about platforms. But there is a question about what is a public space. Yeah, and I think we have all cultural understandings of what that might be. I mean, even a guest house, you know, or an Oktoberfest is a public space. Yeah, we might be maybe at a table where we want to have a private conversation, and we would have some different expectations on, you know, the privacy at that table. Yeah. But the digital platforms now are eradicating the boundaries between private and public spaces. Yeah, so anytime you have a smart device on, speech assistants are going to listen in. Yeah, even if it's off, they often listen in. So this could be a bedroom, it could be all sorts of things. So I think this is a much deeper question of, you know, what does it mean in a digital future? What is a private space? What's a public space? And of course, employment law also in Germany has some very clear frames for, you know, what you might be able to do in a factory hall. But I think looking, you know, more forward into 10 or 20 years, you know, I was almost going to say our grandchildren might then look back and say, oh, this concept of informational self-determination, it's very interesting. What were people thinking about back then? You know, so, I mean, I don't want to see that sort of future, but that is a possible future.
Yes, but Michael, what I have in mind is, you know that in some domains you have surveillance also running, which is not a public place, which should be, for example, the banks, where they analyze the ATM machines and have a view on this. So we have such kind of places. Petrol stations sometimes have also this kind of. These are, from my point of view, a more private area. Yeah, and they have some private interest to verify. In the public domain, the algorithm which comes up by learning of different places and different cities, you can use this learning also for the private domain. This was my point to raise. And you know, in the public domain, the main topic is a normal profile of a walking person. It's okay, but if a person stayed too long at one place, put some bag on the bottom, then some alerts goes up. You know this, yeah. So that means you are not looking for the normal profile of citizen. You are looking for the anomaly topics. People who have a special running part or stay long time at one place, and then you analyze what's happened. Yeah, we have seen this in the marathon Boston, United States topic, where we have this attack by a bomb that the government knows at the same day, the first name of two brothers, and they know at the same day where they are staying at this time. So this needs a lot of knowledge. This needs a lot of AI intelligence. This needs a big database at the end. And this can create such kind of very evolution topics in this domain. I would go to, again, back to Ahmed. We have talked now on video surveillance, camera systems, public places, private places, but in mobility, we have many, many other use cases for AI. For example, how you try to go for swarm intelligence in big cities to look where we have some problems with too much traffic, how we can control such kind of traffic system in big cities which are growing, like London, like Berlin, where we have a lot of traffic jam. We have also other areas of AI where we see AI can help to reduce waiting time, to reduce pollution, to reduce such kind of waste time. Can you give us some other flavor regarding mobility and AI application on use cases, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that at least I am involved in, and I also see it a bit more from, let's say, from critical point of view, is the fact that you already mentioned, that is the smart cities. And assume that these smart cities will one day exist. And in Darmstadt, interestingly, it is called the digital city. I have never seen anything which has to do with digital city, but this is how our label.
Label, yeah.
This is only the label. But if you look at, for example, a broader sense where somebody can find a parking space by just being led by certain cloud provider with their intelligent services, which definitely involve some machine learning and some AI in intelligence. There are, of course, a lot of interesting applications. My fear is, because I'm paranoid, my fear is always that we talk about things and assume that in Germany we don't talk, and we really apply it. And even we apply it, do we know what we are doing? So there is what I mean with that, that assume the smart city with all these nice services, and I find a security vulnerability, just one, because of mobility and connectivity, they are very much connected. And so what can I do to really, so to say, ransom the whole city? And this will be the future, so to say, dystopian future that I think about AI. There is also a bright future where you can really help to cure cancer. I would say that is what I look into the age of AI, rather than collecting data from myself. People who are related to me, as you mentioned already in the Boston case, and they really, I don't think that they did very, very sophisticated algorithms for that. They just have the information because they just record it everywhere. So, and then they connect it to each other. That's the problem with the so-called public places. Yeah. And in that sense, well, this was good, but there are many other cases. In London, we have seen the software for face recognition that was biased, trained in a very biased way, and there was so many protests against that. So yes, there are lots of applications that we are talking about. Pollution, for example. I think we have AI is a very good, so to say, interesting point for researchers to look into it, and for innovators to look into the nice solutions. But personally, I think for pollution, we have definitely other problems that we have to solve.
Yeah.
And this goes way beyond the using AI, as we see it in the energy case. Wrong politics, dependency on one country makes us now really crazy, because everything is getting expensive and people don't know what to do. So if AI can solve that problem, I would love AI for every aspect of it. But I don't think that we are so far with our AI algorithms. Maybe last point, I am just advocating we should not give everything to the big tech companies, because they are buying everyone. They are buying every faculty member. They are everything that is, so to say, buyable, they are buying. So purchasable, they are purchasing. And the question is, would one day academic research in this area be completely obsolete because we don't have access to all the data that they have access to? And we just need to think with coming with some algorithmic way to really improve things, but we don't have the data to test on it. So these are the more things that I see it from the critical point of view, beside the applications of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mobility, Marian, Gläser brings me to another point. In mobility, we have a lot of technology changings. We see LTE goes to 5G, next generation would be 6G. We see GPS navigation system goes now to Galileo navigation system. So we have a lot of technology innovations, new technologies in place. Did you expect some, let me say, new business models in respect to mobility in AI software services solution? did you see more rooms for discussion on security and privacy because we goes in new standards like 5G or new frameworks like Galileo? Can you give us some insights? What is your expectation regarding technology trends in mobility?
Sure. And I would lean it towards privacy enhancing technologies for this topic specifically. Actually, first picking up on the use cases of what Ahmed actually said. And I feel like there's also a strong connection really to the threats involved. And I think looking also at the AI Act, it's very threat driven. And this is good to basically watch out for what potential misuse can be done. I look at as a startup also, and you are asking for new business models,
yes.
A little bit of a more opportunistic space. So when there is basically new innovations in smart cities, or we have one project with the Deutsche Bahn, and Deutsche Bahn has 40,000 cameras. So it's really a gigantic like institution, company, public transport to use and leverage camera data for smart cities. We have a project with them where we enable them to understand the distribution of passengers in trains in order to give a guidance system the moment that a train enters, whether to go into the front, into the back, or in the middle in order to get a seat. It actually went through the press quite a bit. And the Deutsche Bahn decided early on to set on a privacy technology before even the analytics is being made, like how many people are in the front and in the back due to with video analytics. And this is why I say a bit more opportunistic and looking at privacy enhancing technologies. So what we, for example, developed for these cases, we anonymize video data, faces and license plates by replacing the original face and license plate with artificial replacements. That way, and Björn already talked about the importance of data, the data stays very natural to the original data. So it looks still natural. It doesn't have any artifacts like blurring or black bars, but any individual cannot be tracked anymore. And this enables smart cities. It enables also bigger corporates to use the data with a new privacy layer on top, that individuals cannot be tracked by an automotive company, data misused or leaked across the city, but it enables at the same time the innovation and smart city use cases that I at least also see not just as a threat, but as an opportunity as a passenger to have basically more convenience in trains. There are basically early use cases to understand the infrastructure for a changing society, to have it more mobility and barrierefrei, more accessibility, and understand basically how people are moving in public. So I believe there's also for Europe right now a quite interesting situation. So the GDPR, which then basically triggered the domino effect of other regulations worldwide, continuing in the privacy space, the European Union started somehow this wave of privacy, and especially those threats and also the understanding of how to bring together basically innovation without these threats also created an ecosystem of new companies. So we are one of them, providing a privacy solution for video data. There are others in IoT and structured data such as Status.io. There are lots of companies using generative synthetic data to overcome basically real world data being used or needed at all. So quite a bit of technological movement where Europe and the startups that are developing out of the space are actually ahead of the Silicon Valley. They are ahead of other regions in the world where privacy laws such as the CCPA or the PIPA, CSL in China, they are just approaching. And so I think it's an interesting space to be, and not to only look at the threats, but also the opportunities of solving them.
Yeah, many thanks. Michael, we mentioned sometimes London, we mentioned sometimes video surveillance. We have not touched city tax for cars. We have in London this kind of payment system where cameras analyze the license plate of a car, and the driver or the holder of the car gets a daily fee topic on this. We have this also in Stockholm and some other cities to control the city and also to reduce traffic jam in such kind of city. This is for me one of the example which is running in some European countries. Did you see this also for the capital of Italy or the capital of Germany, or did you say too much privacy concerns, too much public discussion that is not allowed? You can track and trace cars, you can track and trace the driver. This is not possible. So London is a special case. After the bomb attack in London, they have brought this kind of controlling system with cameras. Stockholm is another special case. This is for me one example where we have exactly the mobility and the discussion on privacy, the tracking and tracing of people in place, and nobody think on this in London today. There's no debate and newsletter. Every person accepts this. Is this a model for Europe, or this is a special use case for some special places?
Yeah, thanks, Detlef. That's an excellent topic, actually. Let me sort of answer this in various ways. I mean, first of all, historically, this was implemented in London to improve on pollution in the city. Yeah. And the hope was that less vehicles would actually enter. Yeah. It had the opposite effect. There's actually more vehicles in the center now than there used to. But it actually was a huge source of revenue for the city, which is also why other cities, some of them you've mentioned, were quite eager to adopt this. Yeah. So, but I think this, abstracting from this makes a more sort of important point around mobility. I mean, we mentioned private versus public transport. I think we have to think of these as systems of systems here, where the economics, the social behavior, and municipal policy and so on all have to come together and align to design things like multimodal transport systems that actually work. Yeah. And so I think this was just more an isolated measure to control inflow of cars, but actually the more severe restrictions in terms of pollution of vehicles who are allowed to enter has actually improved the air quality in London. It's now on most days better than in my village back in Germany, you know, so this has really had very dramatic effects independent of that. And on the tracking and the privacy, it's a bit like with the gas station. I mean, the video recordings can only be kept for very specific purposes. And so, you know, as long as no one commits any illegal acts, you know, there is actually no genuine privacy issues here. You know, these things will just be recorded. There will be a service transaction, someone gets a bill, and no one can actually collate this information to understand, you know, how often a certain vehicle entered a certain domain over time and so on and so forth. Yep. Yeah, that's actually not allowed. Yeah, but I think this whole point about intermodal transport systems, so we have colleagues in my department who actually work on this in optimization and behavioral science, is a very, very important topic. I'm a bit concerned that some of the innovation is just happening in silos, you know, like autonomous driving as one source of innovation, and then we have maybe smarter buses or low pollution buses. But these systems have to be interlocked and joined together to make a lasting impact.
I would come back to Marian Gläser regarding some publication on the platform learning system in the past. There was a paper created by an expert group regarding multi-modal transport system for big cities where people must go every day from place A to place B, and they have the option to take public transport, private transport, leasing car, bicycle, and so on and so on. And we have also created a kind of guideline regarding privacy and security in this area. But my question to you is this kind of use case, multi-modal navigation system for consumers, for the daily life, is this really a business model for some big cities like Munich, like Stuttgart, like Frankfurt, Darmstadt, or like Berlin? Or did you say this will never happen because we have big players like Deutsche Bahn who have their own business interest? We have the taxi lobby who have their own business interest. We have the car sharing companies who have their own business interest in the kind of intermodal platform as an information system for the citizen, for the consumer, will be not happen. What is your view as a startup company regarding such kind of intelligent transport navigation system for the citizen?
I think it's an excellent question, especially for bigger cities where last mile transportation, scooters, cars, buses are combined in the everyday life from some people multiple times. And then there's probably differentiation between more platforms that connect these multimodality providers together. And then there are more of an end-to-end approach, such as you see with FreeNow, where they actually connect within one platform their own services all together and try to give an end-to-end experience. I think that you ask for the opportunity of the city, understanding it also a little bit from the public side, or for the city itself. I think that there's an opportunity also with looking at autonomous vehicles along the way, that actually the city can be a little bit of a directing and guiding system, or the Senate directing and guiding system of how to bring those individual transport system in the best way together for the citizens. I think that in Berlin with Yelby, this started, for example, providing public spaces where actually those mobility services come together and can be switched on. There's a dedicated app which is provided, and I think that the ownership or the opportunity is that the ownership of how we move within the city is not only directed and made by the corporates and companies that provide these services, but by the cities itself. And I think there's a huge opportunity where I think that smart cities should basically pursue, and not let basically other platforms and the providers end-to-end solve the problem, but be engaged in that ecosystem.
Okay, I think with this we can also make a short cut on mobility, and I would like to take the last minutes for the topic of learning in two different domains. Learning across the domain means, is there something what healthcare can learn from the mobility, or is there something where mobility can learn from the healthcare sector? I would like to start with Björn. What is your feeling after listening to the mobility corner, let me say?
I actually don't have a feeling. I had a whole PhD dissertation on the topic of how to transfer knowledge and learnings from the automotive sector, which you could argue is the mobility sector, to the healthcare domain. Actually, the healthcare domain is not as good as, for example, car manufacturers, the providers of mobility solutions, in terms of processes, in terms of streamlining how the customer is addressed, and these kind of things, as compared to the healthcare sector. So I can just recommend to everybody who's interested in the cross-learning to have a look at the PhD dissertation of Stefan Mainzer. That's the PhD candidate that did that a couple of years ago. He's now still in the automotive industry, but he had enough learnings for the healthcare sector. Also, a big learning is, of course, that in the automotive domain, there's these data sets that I talked about earlier available, and it's of course a huge asset and something that motivated the healthcare domain to also strive for these kind of interoperable large data sets. And that's also something that is behind the efforts in the European health data space and the medical informatics initiative. So for those of you that are a bit closer to the medical domain, I wouldn't say it's inspired by mobility, but it's certainly seen that in these domains that have access to large data sets, as we pointed out in the beginning, this is relevant for AI, and therefore it's crucial for healthcare to also be innovative in the digital domain.
Yep. Ahmed Sadeghi, you are the second person in this round coming from the research corner. Let me say very simple. What is your feeling regarding this bridging of the knowledge of different domains, looking to other domains to learn something between these two topics, healthcare, services, and mobility? Did you see some areas for new development in software, new development in systems, or did you see some synergy between both? Can you give us some views in respect to this, creates this new discussion on IT security and new discussion on privacy? That's the main.
So I mentioned in the keynote today that there are so from security point of view, yes, I think that's very, very useful, because we can't deny it, we can't avoid it, as we could not avoid cloud. And the cloud trend and hype is now really like common sense. We don't need to have any hype about the cloud. It is being used, thousands of servers all over the world. And then combining all kind of areas together to just get maybe more information. I see it not only from a person who is, you said, as coming from an academic corner. I had startups that were also doing AI, and we sold it, so you can have profit from it. I came from industry to academia, so there is, and having intelligent telecommunication systems were at that time a big thing, where machine learning played a very small role. And now it is a huge area for itself. So we cannot avoid connection of mobility with e-health. As you said, you can have mobile stations, mobile hospitals. You can have crisis where you need this, as we saw it in pandemic time, and we are prepared for that. But at the end, we cannot, I think, currently, we cannot really transfer the security measures, features, and methodologies one-to-one to AI systems, AI-based systems. We can't say your system is with probability of 95% secure, because there is a 5% way to fail.
Yes.
So this is, we can't say this encryption works for 70% of the time. The 30% of the time you may lose your data. So this is not what we can say. It's a very simple example. I'm just simplifying, but it shows that we cannot go from a kind of deterministic area to a probabilistic area. And this is what is the matter of it, security, that we need to take care of it. So security by design for AI. So that's what I'm just propagating.
Yeah. Marian, Gläser, you comes from the corner of mobility. You have now some first business models, some first learnings. Did you see also, for your view, also some interest to move into healthcare?
We actually did, which is interesting. Yes. Okay. So background, we were founded in the automotive industry, a spin out of an automotive company 5 years ago. And our majority of clients are from the automotive space currently. But we have, for example, with Stryker, one medical company that is actually using us to anonymize data within healthcare, which is recorded basically within the healthcare sector, and then to understand and improve how people behave and act, and ultimately support their development and R&D. So I would see this is from at least my perspective one field where each domain, each vertical can learn or leverage each other. So the automotive tech that we developed, and that is quite high grade for the use case that we initially target, is now being used also in other industries that didn't basically have this initial burden of first clients to work on new technologies, but actually have now a solid status of a privacy enhancing technology in healthcare. So and this is maybe the enabling tech across these topics, security, privacy, and so on. These can, I think, be a good transfer for multiple industries.
Okay, Michael, you are the second person in the cycle coming from the industry point of view, industry business point of view. What is your feeling regarding these two different verticals and some synergies in small, medium enterprises, companies, to say we have the knowledge on AI, we can move from mobile to health or from health to mobile. It's an easy way.
Yeah, I mean, I would sort of second what Ahmed has said about, it's difficult to transfer the methodologies with high confidence. But that said, I mean, I find it quite fascinating that a lot of health issues and public health sort of topics navigate around mobility. I mean, just recently in the press, I think we read that people who walk at least 120 steps a minute, on a certain frequency actually have less likelihood of getting dementia, stuff like that. So I read that with pleasure because I'm a very fast walker. But I mean, that's just sort of an example, right, of this kind of potential synergy of understanding mobility behavior and tying it up with sort of individual health, but also public health. And the other thing I wanted to say around privacy is, I mean, Porsche, for example, and Apple are two interesting design brands that really now make privacy part of their core value proposition. Yeah, and they're both, of course, very consumer oriented, where the customer experience is everything. And maybe the health sector, certainly in Europe, would benefit from, sort of selling that kind of thing also within a better customer experience. But sometimes I think hospitals, because of their financial situation, for them, the patient is almost, from a financial point of view, the product, if I dare say so, and the insurers and the funders are sort of, where the business model sits. So I think there's probably also an opportunity to revisit some of these workflows and how the power distributions work in these domains, especially in the public health sector. I think there's some real opportunities there.
Many thanks for your statements. Many thanks for the question answer session. I think we have now raised the last around 90 minutes, many topics in two verticals. One is in the healthcare domains, looking on safety, security, and privacy topic. We have a deep view into the mobility topic. We have talked also on regulation, on technologies, on new trends, on new business models. We have talked on different stakeholder. I think this gives a broad view about AI application use cases, but also the terms on discussion on AI in terms of IT security and privacy. We have raised a lot of specific aspects. We have also raised different application topics. We have talked on big companies, small, medium enterprise companies. We have talked on new business models. And I think this gives a flavor that this is a topic of many talks and many discussion. And we have also talked on the impact of some new regulations in this domain, which is very, very important in the European economic area. I think with this, today we can close this discussion. I hope this brings all the participants some new information, some new points for discussions, for takeaways. My final statement is that the platform learning system where we come from here is also working on a new white paper on data protection and data use. This is expected by Q1 next year. You can see it on the webpage of Platform Learning Systems in Germany. Also, the existing publication in those domains. We have different working groups in this platform regarding AI in different applications, but also in some cross-domain horizontal topics like privacy, like security. And this was today the idea to bring two main application parts to your attention, which is of interest of many users, like the healthcare and like the mobility. And I think with this we can close the discussion. And if there is one or two questions from the audience, maybe we can bring this up. Who can see some? I think in the chat room we have found no topics, some hand ups. I see no hand ups. Okay, then I would close this session for today. Many thanks to Björn, Eskofier, to Marian, Gläser, to Professor Ahmad-Reza, Sadeghi, and to Professor Michael Huth. Thanks for the audience for participation. Take care, stay healthy, and goodbye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, and thank you
Thank you
for
very much.
organizing. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much for the panel. And one last remark, please don't miss the city tour at 5 o'clock here in Zoom. See you then.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye now.